Welcome to the Growth Shift. I'm David Zylstra. Here's what I've learned after years in business. Every leader who's built something meaningful has a story, but the moment they had to shift, when failure forced innovation, when change became opportunity, when they chose growth over comfort. On this show, we dive into those pivotal moments, the setbacks that became breakthroughs, the strategic shifts that accelerated growth, and the frameworks that turn obstacles into opportunities. Because here's the truth. In a world where change is the only constant, the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid failure. They're the ones who've learned to shift strategically through it. So whether you're facing your own pivot point or just want to learn from someone who's been there, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Today we're joined by Robert MacPhee, a values-based leadership expert who made one of the most dramatic career pivots you'll ever hear about. From running a parking company to becoming the director of training for Jack Canfield's organization, working alongside the co-creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul. At 65, Robert has discovered what might be his most impactful work yet, helping leaders clarify their core values through a unique two-category system that's generating the best response of his 25-year career. Today, he's facing an interesting challenge: how to scale back while capitalizing on breakthrough momentum. Robert, welcome to the Growth Shift.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. So we were chatting the other day, and you mentioned something interesting. Going from running a parking company originally to working with Jack Canfield, that's quite the leap. Walk me how that really played out. I mean, how did you end up where you are today?
Yeah, it's so interesting. As I listened to you describe that pivot, I remember the moment that I was first at one of Jack's trainings and I was still running that parking company. I was meeting all these amazing people who were like the director of education for the state of Nebraska and a quantum physicist or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I run a parking company. And they're like, why are you even here, dude? But the truth is, the whole parking company story was very much of an accidental entrepreneurial success. A very good friend of mine and I started a company as a summer job in San Diego, helping some restaurants right on the coast control their parking lots and get more revenue in for them. He and I had both been valets when we were in high school, and it turned out to be just incredibly good timing, really. It was a great opportunity. Within about 7 years, we had over 400 employees, and we were doing special events in hotels and hospitals and restaurants all over the place. And it was a great experience, incredible experience. And I learned so much, and we had a lot of fun. I look back on that. It was kind of a dream lifestyle. It was riding my bike to work and working on the beach kind of thing. So it was a really great scenario. And as the company grew, I ended up being the person who was in charge of developing our people, like putting the structure in place and creating a culture that really worked. And, we were just making it up as we went along. Our first management training program involved buying 6 sets of cassette tapes by Stephen Covey and sharing them with our managers and just talking about it. But it really worked. And that work, getting involved with the Covey work and a lot of other things at that time, really got me engaged. Like, I really became much more interested in that. And while I was still working for the parking company, I did go to one of Jack's summer trainings. It was a week-long training in Santa Barbara, and it was a total game changer for me. I was learning things as, in my mid-30s, probably mid-30s, late 30s. Wow. And things that I wish someone had taught me when I was in high school. Like, why didn't people teach me about personal responsibility and how the way I'm thinking and the beliefs I'm holding are having such a huge impact on the results I'm creating and the experiences I'm having? So I just ended up diving in full bore. And I went to Jack's training a couple of times. I actually volunteered to support the work that he was doing because it had been so helpful to me. And eventually I ended up working for him. I sold my interest in the parking company, and I ended up working for him as his director of training for about 7 years, which was a great experience. I tell people that was while my kids were really young. And imagine you're a father and your children are in those really formative years and you're hanging out with Jack Canfield and all of his friends, and just being in those kinds of conversations was really, really impactful for me as a parent. And I just kind of I shifted into doing this transformational work and training and development work within Jack's organization for a long time, and then eventually went out on my own after my role in Jack's organization had kind of reached its limit. There wasn't much more for me to do there.
Well, Robert, I think there's a little bit of insight that I'd love to pull out of this story as well. I mean, right at the beginning, you mentioned that you were in this room, right, with other business owners at one of Jack Canfield's events, and you're hearing named like large titles around you, maybe feeling inwardly like, oh wow, do I really belong here? Meanwhile, you're running a company of hundreds of employees, arguably probably doing a lot more and having more impact than many of these people around you. But it sounds like even at that time, maybe you were dealing with a little bit of imposter syndrome.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. And the person who I had working with me at one point on the kind of the training and development side of our business, because we were growing so fast, I couldn't do it myself. So I had somebody who had worked for us for a while who was working with me on it. And we ended up getting invited in San Diego to join this group of mostly like HR professionals. Like it was like a networking and support group for people from companies. And they had put this list of companies together based on the size of the companies in San Diego. And because we had so many employees, we looked like a big company in that criteria. But we were like 500 employees and $4 million or something like that. And I'd meet people who were like, $10 million company with 4 employees. Oh my God, that's a dream come true. I want that job. But he and I were in a meeting one time, and we're looking around the room, and it's like Sony and Qualcomm and these like medical companies, these huge companies, and we're like, yeah, we're like Sunset Valet parking company. But one of the things we realized, like your question makes me think back to a time that we actually did a presentation to that organization. We did a presentation about something called open book management, where my partner had read an article in a magazine about open book management. And he saw, we should really do this. We need to share with our people like what our finances are. Because all cash business, it was really important for people to understand like where the money was going. And so we read this article in this magazine and we put together a little program. We did it within like 3 months or something like that. And all these people from Sony and Qualcomm and whatever, they're like, oh my God, it would take me like 6 months just to write a proposal to think maybe we might do this sometime in the next 5 years kind of thing. So there was like that sense of imposter syndrome, like we got to make sure they don't find out who we are or they're going to kick us out kind of thing. But then when we did the presentation and started sharing more about who we were and what we were doing, there was also some real envy in the room. Like we wish we were more like you. Like we wish we could do some of the things that you're doing the way you're doing them.
What do you mean by that? Can you unpack that a little bit more? What were they envious of? Was it like the speed that you were able to move at? Was it something else within this presentation and what you were showing them?
Yeah, I think it was the speed between like the decision we want to do this and actually doing it. Like in the larger organizations, there was a lot of frustration. I've done a lot of work now with organizations, with the values work that I'm doing now and the excellent decisions work that I had been doing previously. And people get really frustrated. Like they see something really important that needs to happen. We're in this group and seeing the level of frustration that people have between that point of decision and the point of putting it into action. And they see something really important that they want to do, but the process that they have to go through, the hoops they have to jump through, the approvals they need to get just creates like frustration and angst instead of like excitement and engagement about the possibility of making a really positive change. And I think the envy that they were feeling was seeing how short we had made that curve. Like we basically read an article in a magazine and did it. It was that simple for us, which was very different than their environment.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. So, I mean, if we fast forward here a little bit, I mean, you were in that room, you felt like maybe you didn't belong. You did belong, right? A short while later, people who were looking at you saying, what are these guys doing here? Were looking at you with admiration, maybe with a little bit of envy as well. And there was a really insightful lesson in that, right? That you could move at speeds that larger companies wished they could, right? You could make decisions faster. When you're in your spot working with Jack, that lesson that you learned in that room, right? Is that something that you had realized in that moment, or was it not until you spent more time developing yourself and looking at these business practices or business challenges that you were able to extract that lesson?
Well, I think that lesson, like that story I told you of actually getting that feedback, like doing that presentation. And we were scared to death to do the presentation too. Like again, it was that we very quickly went from that sense of, oh my God, they're going to find out who we really are and we're going to be out of here. But the feedback that we were getting was so different than that. Like, thank you for sharing that. This is such a great reminder for us. And this is so helpful. And we are kind of envious of your ability to do what you did the way you did it. That really stuck with me. It stuck with me in my work with the parking company that I was still fully engaged with at that time, where I had a very low tolerance for all that BS, like all those layers of approval. Like, you know, we were growing really fast. Like some of those layers were starting to show up. But if you really don't want that, then you don't have to have it. Like you can literally just say no to that. And when I transitioned and I was working for Jack, same thing. You know, I was aware when that showed up very quickly, you know, the layers of decision making or whatever. And I was very committed to plowing through it. Like, no, that's not what we do here. That's not who we are. So, and to this day with the clients that I work with, like, that's not what I'm about. I'm about like, okay, let's make a decision about what we're going to do, what changes you want to make. And I want part of my value working with an organization to be somebody who helps them like plow right through all that stuff and get into action and make it happen rather than spend the next 6 months, you know, putting together the proposal. I actually did some work recently with Unilever, which is probably the biggest company I've ever worked with. And like, they're like a large country. I mean, the company is so big and just involved in so many different things. And I was working with the team within Unilever, but even just that team, like the layers they had to go through. It was a really good reminder for me of how valuable I can be as an outsider to just kind of not accept that. Like, no, if we really want to make this change, how quickly can we do it? I'm looking for the shortcuts, kind of the back doors, if you will, rather than just accepting that this is the way it is, because for me, it's not.
I feel like that's a little bit of a cop-out. This is the way it is. This is the way things have always been done. I mean, there's always a time for change, right? Now, you've experienced some great change in your life, but there's something you mentioned there, excellent decisions. What does that even mean?
So years ago, I wrote a book called Manifesting for Non-Gurus, and I realized really quickly that it was a clever title. I'm still very proud of the book, but it was not a great success as a book. And I realized it was a clever title, but a terrible brand. Like, people would go, what does that even mean? And I actually worked with a remarkable woman in the branding space who helped me rebrand my work from Manifesting for Non-Gurus. And the idea was, you know, you don't need to be, you know, go live in a cave in Bangladesh for 10 years in order to learn how to really manifest the results you want in your life. Great, interesting conversation, but it was just like not working. And I rebranded my work to a concept called Excellent Decisions, which was about making decisions based on vision and values rather than all the external stress and pressure, all the, you know, the advertising and the social media and the people in our lives that have all these ideas about what we should be doing and how we should be doing it, to instead be making our decisions and taking our actions based on what's really important to us, the results that we really want to create, and again, what's important to us. So that was my brand for quite a long time. And there were two things in it. One, people really want to make excellent decisions. People, I think, understand how important decision making is. And they also understand that dynamic of how sometimes we're making decisions not based on our vision and values, but based on all those external influences. And when people realize that, they're interested in what they can do differently. So it was kind of a branding change, but again, really based on making decisions based on vision and values rather than what we're just bombarded with, seemingly conversations you and I have had about AI. It's not getting any better in terms of all the external influences and the power of those external influences, often affecting the way we think, the decisions that we make, the actions we take, and ultimately the results and experiences that we have.
So Robert, excellent decisions. You're looking at vision and you're looking at values. What separates those two?
Well, this was actually, you know, we talked about the pivot from parking into the work with Jack and his organization and the training and development work that I do now. This was another really powerful pivot for me just several years ago. And the excellent decisions work and the branding around it has worked out really well for me. And at the same time, I realized that it isn't really vision and values in terms of like together. It's values and then vision. Because if we have a really powerful vision, but it's not aligned with our values, then it's probably not going to work out. all that well. So there really is a syntax to it in terms of the order and sequence that it needs to go. I believe it's very important to do the values work first and then create a really powerful and compelling vision that's aligned with those values. And I think this is the answer to your question, is I think that when we do that, when we have a vision that is aligned with our values and we're in pursuit of that vision, then we're on purpose. Like, to me, it's like math. Like, that is the definition of purpose and meaning in our life, is to be in pursuit of a vision that is aligned with what we've chosen to be our highest values, what's most important to us.
That's really interesting. And I could see how that would play out on an individual level, right, for individual decision making. But how does this play out with companies that you're working with? How do you help them define both vision and values in a way that makes sense to the organization?
It plays out almost exactly the same way. So there's personal values. There's also professional values. The truth is, there's hopefully not huge shifts. We don't want to be a completely different person at work than we are at home. But like in my own case, like some of my my highest personal values are things like being caring and kind. And I consider myself like a calm, peaceful, unflappable under pressure kind of person. And those are all good and feel really on purpose for me. But sometimes at work, they don't serve me very well. Like, I got to get stuff done, So some of the professional values that show up can be more in the category of discipline and focus and strength to just kind of suck it up and get things done and make things happen at work. So there's personal and there's professional, and then there's also organizational. Like the values of the organization hopefully are really well aligned with my personal values. In my case, I run my own company, so they're pretty well aligned. But we want people who are going to work, even if it's not their company, and knowing what their own values are, and also having a really strong sense that their values align with the values of the company they're working for, the organization they're a part of, and that's where the real engagement comes from. And I think one of the most interesting things I've learned on this journey of really diving deep into values work is that it's not the organizational values that really create the engagement. It's actually the personal values. So when an organization is willing to support their people in getting clear about their own personal values, and even at the risk that they might lose some people, because if people get really clear about their personal values and then they look at the organizational values and go, no, not for me, they might lose some people. But I always tell my clients or prospective clients, like, do you really want that person, like, in a key position if their values, like what's really important, doesn't match with the organization's values? So yeah, you don't want to have to lose people, and it's time consuming to replace them and whatever. But at some point, I think you're going to lose them anyway, because again, if that alignment isn't there. So it was a real aha to me to realize, and there's actually really solid research to back this up, that the real engagement comes from supporting your people in getting really clear about their own values and then taking a look at the organizational values versus what a lot of companies do, which is go out and get the leaders together and go on a retreat to Cancun and discover their highest values and come back and tack them up on the wall and tell everyone else, these are our values, this is what we're going to do, whether you like it or not. Sometimes that kind of work can actually create more harm than good, especially if the leaders aren't following those values that they just tacked up on the wall.
I was thinking there that, the approach that you take with founding vision and values within the people in the organization as well, it almost seems a backward approach to many traditional approaches, right?
That's what I thought when I first saw the research.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
wow.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But at the same time, it makes sense though, right? Like if you imagine running an organization where you're surrounded by people who are really clear about their own values and they have that sense of their own values connecting to what we're up to as an organization, as a leader, it's called get out of the way and let them do what they're here to do, because they're on. Do
you have any sort of examples of how this has played out in any clients that you've worked with?
It's so funny because people ask me that question all the time. And I always think of the same example. And it goes back to when I was first doing this values work and I was actually working with a construction company. And their core work was recycling concrete. It was, the people I was working with were amazing, but it was one of the least glamorous companies I have ever worked with. And it was, again, early in the days of really doing this values work in the unique way that I do it. And I was working with their CEO and I said, well, we should bring this in and work with your team. It would be really helpful. And And I remember when I was driving to this half-day workshop we were going to do with their leadership team, and I was like, oh man, if it works here, it's going to work anywhere. Because these were like hard hat guys, like, right? They're out in the yard, their truckloads of concrete are coming in, and they're like grinding it up and
There to work
recycling
hard,
it.
yeah.
Like,
Not
it
think
was
of
like,
much else, right?
it was
Put it
like
to work.
real work, right?
Yeah.
And I got these guys in the room, and we started this conversation about values and what was most important to them. And with an organization, we start with, what do you do? Like, what are the things that you do? So you can identify the most important of those things and hopefully be putting your time and attention on that versus, again, other things that, you know, might be distractions or urgent or but not really important kind of thing. And so I was asking them, like, what do you do? And they're like looking at me like I'm stupid or something. They're like, we recycle concrete. Like, what do you mean? Like, okay, great. We put that up on the flip chart. What else do you do? And again, they looked at me like I was a crazy person. Like, that's what we do. And I said, well, you know, that's not the only thing you do. Like, what else do you do? Think about all your stakeholders. Think about, you know, your employees and your customers and your clients and your vendors and your community, like all the people that you interact with. What else do you do? And somebody kind of timidly raised their hand and said, well, we really like to create opportunities for the people who work here. Like, we want to create a career path for them. Okay, great. And we put that up on the flip chart. And somebody else kind of raised their hand and went, well, we really are committed to being a good neighbor. Like, we want to make sure we're not creating too much of a mess for our neighbors. Okay, great. And they ended up making this whole list of like 10, 15 things, all these different things that they do for their employees and for their neighbors and for their, you know, all their different stakeholders, you know, research and development and staying on the cutting edge and doing all the latest things and all this stuff. And they got really, really into it. And I think that was one of the moments where I really realized it truly was like, okay, if this can happen here, it can happen anywhere. And I worked with them for more than a year. And the difference that it made, like they were suddenly going to work and they weren't just grinding up concrete. They were being a good neighbor. They were creating opportunities for their employees. They were doing the research and development to make sure they were doing it in the best way possible and, you know, committed to the environment, all these different things. Like they felt differently about their work because of the commitment that they had or the clarity they had about the things that they were doing and the most important ones.
It sounds like, you know, taking an organization through an exercise like that really helps the employees find more of a sense of community, of belonging, of cohesion, and perhaps just recognizing that, hey, we're really here for the same reason, rather than having those values handed down at training time when you're on board. And this is who we are. This is who we stand for, or what we stand for.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really insightful.
Yeah. And again, the worst is if those values are on the wall and we look especially at leadership and we see that they're not doing that. And at that point, I really believe, you know, I'm a huge fan of values work, obviously, but I think in that case, it can actually do more harm than good if leadership is not going to really live and operate in alignment with the values that we have come up with as a team. It can really decrease engagement rather than increase it. And I remember, I think a lot of people can relate to the experience of looking at the work that they do and finding more meaning in it. I actually remember back with the parking company that my partner and I realized in the early days we were almost exclusively working with restaurants. And we realized that these restaurant owners, you know, these are people who have invested their life savings and they've taken money from other people and they're putting everything they have into this restaurant and the margins are razor thin. It is a hard business. And we realized that these restaurant owners were trusting us, you know, two college kids. They were trusting us with the first and last impression of their customer. So no matter how good a job they did in the restaurant, the hostess, the bartender, the cocktail waitress, the waiter, the chef, everything, no matter how good a job they did, we were the first and last impression. So if we were on the way in, if we were rude, if we looked sloppy, whatever, they maybe could never recover from that. Like, you know, or if we didn't show up, like whatever, like if we screwed it up on the way in, they could never recover. And worse yet, if they did everything perfect inside, like everything was perfect, you know, it was one of those, they sang happy birthday at the, you know, table kind of nights, right? And then they go out and where's the valet? Or the valet can't find their car. Or worse yet, and I had to deal with this for years, what if the valet damaged their car?
I don't know if cell phones were quick pictures back then as well.
No, it was, but it made us look at the work we were doing completely differently. We went from two guys. I mean, we were more sophisticated than this. Basically, we were two guys parking cars. You know, you show up, take the car, be careful, get it back in one piece, you're good to go, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when we looked at it like we are responsible for the first and last impression of this restaurant owner's customer, like that felt like a huge responsibility. Like that's a whole different deal than just parking a car and bringing it back. Like, and we started to translate that to our people to make them realize, like, imagine you're the restaurant owner. Like, this is the responsibility you have. And it really fundamentally changed the way we looked at our business.
Robert, with what you're saying here, I mean, it's obvious that you've had an incredible impact, and there's a lot that you can help organizations, right? I know you work with smaller companies because they're more nimble. I think also because you can have more of an impact at a quicker rate as well. You know, you don't have your established tenured VPs who have been there for a while who, you know, definitely don't fit into the culture, let's say. But you mentioned that, you know, you're 65, but you're wanting to start toning things down, right? Taking a step back, perhaps, while also increasing the effect or the response to your work. How are you navigating that as a leader, knowing when to step back versus, you know, when to lean in?
Yeah. Well, it's there's an irony to it because it's like 20 years to create an overnight success kind of mentality. And it's really forcing me to practice what I preach because I am 65 years old. You can probably tell I'm not really interested in retiring or stopping doing the work that I'm doing. But I do want to kind of tone it down a little bit. And I'm in a place where this values work that I'm doing now, where I'm finding that people really understand the importance of values. Like most people don't know their values. You stand on a street corner and ask 100 people, you know, can you articulate what your highest values are? You might find one. And yet people know, like this is important. They kind of feel like they should know their values. And because we have a very unique way of approaching values, we're helping people discover their values in two separate categories, which we find helps people, one, remember what they discover, and two, be able to implement it, like make a lasting difference with it by separating it and making it less confusing. So for the first time, not the first time, but more than ever, I'll say, in my career, I have a conversation that moves very quickly to people like, yeah, I want to do this. Like this is important. I know I want to do it personally, or I want you to do this with my company, or sometimes both. I just did a workshop a couple of weeks ago at Esalen, and there was a woman in the workshop on the 5-day workshop, and on the second day she was like, oh my God, I need you to do this with my company. So that's all great. Like I'm super happy about that. But I'm also at that place where I really want to kind of slow down a little bit. Like I don't want to just be taking everything that comes my way. So it really does force me to practice what I preach. And I really am focused on navigating through that kind of first world problem of a lot of demand for the work that I'm doing by focusing on what's most important. Like, where can I make the biggest difference? Where can I make the biggest impact with this work? And, you know, it might not be, next Tuesday night, Zoom class. It might be working with a company that has thousands of employees and making sure that this work gets really all throughout their whole company. But it really is. I mean, I'm not complaining about it like it's a problem. Yeah. It's just a kind of a condition that's important for me to stay aware of. And again, practice what I preach. Like, am I putting my time and attention? The first category of values that I was talking about, we call priorities. Like, what are my highest priorities? What are the areas of my life that it's important for me to put time and attention on to create the best possible results and experiences? And that's what I'm doing for myself and in my business as well is, am I spending my time and attention on the things that are most important and making the biggest possible difference?
So it sounds like that pivot point for you now is going from working with smaller organizations who maybe you enjoy working with a little bit more for specific reasons to working perhaps with larger organizations that are aligned with your values because you realize you can have more of an impact even if perhaps it's not as immediately enjoyable in the front end. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I'm still not thrilled about working with the really large organizations. Like my experience with Unilever was fabulous. I was working with a legal team within Unilever, and the leader of that team was 100% committed to this work and doing this work and sharing it with her team. So it was kind of like I was working with this huge, huge company, but I was also working with a small team within the company. And I'm still committed, and it's interesting. People, to this day for me, people say, oh, I'm a small business. I only have 1,000 employees. I'm like, okay, for me, that's a pretty big company.
Yeah.
And again, with 1,000 employees, you've got some layers there. Like you're going to have those issues that we were talking about people, having to navigate through some getting approvals and getting, writing a proposal and whatever before they just start going crazy and changing things. But yeah, so it's not so much about the size of the company, I think the most important thing to me, and I actually was just on a call earlier this morning that really emphasized this in a unique way. It was really cool. But a place where I can really make a difference. Like I'm really interested in working for a company where the leadership is really committed to doing this work. Like I don't want to do this work and create one of those beautiful plaques that the leaders post up on the wall, but then they're not committed to living it, because then it's not making a difference. Like it's not going to happen. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but it isn't so much about the size of the company, I would say, but the commitment of the leadership in the company.
It makes sense. And you might just be working with a smaller team within that organization as well,
Yeah.
which is probably a little bit more aligned with your preferences, maybe not your overall vision and value, but
Yeah, I love to walk away from a job
Yeah.
or even a segment of a job and just know, like, these people are going to use this, like, and sometimes, honestly, sometimes it's like a half-day workshop and it's a company that's just checking a box, and I walk away and I go, no, if I come back in 6 months and anybody remembers any of this, I'll be really happy, because I just don't know.
Yeah.
This
I think,
workshop I just did at Esalen here in California a few weeks ago. Amazing group of people, and I walked away just knowing that they are going to continue on a very fast pace with this work. They were really embedded in the work, and that's the experience I'm looking for as a facilitator. Like,
Now,
how can I help them stay on that path?
what do you think separates these types of leaders or leadership teams, the ones who maybe invest in cultural development, values, and vision-based development for their team, and don't implement it? Maybe they're doing it just as a little bit of a show, and the ones who actually adopt it. Like, what separates these companies?
Come on, you know how I'm going to answer that. It's their values. But, to some degree, I really do think it is their values. And I think those values in a lot of cases have come either from their parents or their teachers or coaches that they had, or from previous leaders that they've worked for, the kind of company that they really want to create. It can also come from experiences that they didn't like. If I had a leader and he was kind of a jerk, I might have a really strong commitment to leading very differently than that person. If I had a leader who I didn't like because all they ever did was tell me what to do, I'm really committed probably to creating a culture where that doesn't happen, where people are involved and engaged and are empowered to do the work and do it in their way and create really amazing results, even if it isn't done the exact same way I might have done it. I do really think that ultimately the difference between a culture that's just going to be checking a box and getting back to work and a company that really wants to dive in, do the work, create a difference in terms of culture and engagement and things like that is a leadership question. I can't think of a single time that has happened in spite of leadership. It always happens because of leadership and their support and their own engagement in it. Like, again, they're not just talking about values; they're actually living them. That's what ultimately makes the difference.
Makes sense. So, with that said, how do you currently identify and connect with the right people then? Do you find they come to you more often, or are you a little bit more strategic with, I'd love to work with this organization because I see what's happening within it?
Yeah, I've been very blessed. Most of my marketing, if you will, most of my clients come from referrals. Or they come out of one form of my work and into a different form of my work. Like this woman I was telling you was in this workshop I just did a few weeks ago. And out of that kind of personal workshop environment came a organizational client. And my intention is to do such an amazing job with her and her company that she says, oh, I know this other company that would really want to talk to you. And, the world of marketing for the coaching and consulting business right now is really, it's tough. Like, I see newer people who don't have the advantage of having been around as long as I have and kind of having the network to generate those kinds of referrals from. It's really hard. Somebody described it to me not that long ago. The problem is the barrier to entry for this kind of work is very low. Pretty much anyone can wake up tomorrow morning and say, you know what? I want to be a business coach. And voila, they had their business cards made at Staples and they are a business coach.
Certified.
But the quality of the results that people are creating and the ability to differentiate, like for an organization or an individual to differentiate between all the claims that all the coaches and consultants are making out there, like how do I decide, who to work with or who's the right person for me? I mean, some of the marketing is really, really good. And some of the people can actually live up to what they're promising. But the sad part of the business I'm in is that there's a lot of people out there who are really good at marketing who, in my experience, don't have that much of a commitment to really following through and creating the results that they're promising or doing it in a lasting way. So anyway, it's kind of like, the wild, wild west out there. You never know. And I feel really blessed because at this stage of my career, I can pretty much just keep doing the work that I'm doing and follow up on the opportunities for referrals and not have to, be trying to go on social media and get new clients. It's like, oh my God, just shoot me. That's the day that happens is the day that I'll be retiring, I think.
That's unbelievable. You're in the position there that I think many coaches and consultants, want to be, wish they could be, right? You don't have to fight to get clients. You're getting great referrals, but I'm kind of curious about a position that you might be in that I think many individual coaches and consultants find themselves in, especially when they're trying to scale, right? You're limited to one person. You want to have more of an impact, whether that's working with more people or, just working with companies or in places where you can have more of an impact. So do you find yourself becoming, a bottleneck in a way when delivering value to clients? Is there any part of your approach that you're looking at now with the evolution of AI, perhaps starting to consider a new pivot towards technology to allow you to do more on your own?
Yeah, and that's come up around this values work that I'm doing because, again, there is more of a demand for it than any other specific kind of presentation of my work that I've done. So I have been looking at what are the ways for me to leverage and get beyond just what I can do as an individual. And what I'm seeing are really two things. One is AI, like you said. I'm actually in a conversation with someone who's wanting me to work with him to create basically an AI version of me that people can get. AI can gather all of this from the videos I've created over the years and all the content I've created over the years can create a kind of a scary, accurate version of me answering someone's question or giving them guidance on some issue that they might be faced with. It's pretty amazing what's possible in that space right now. So I'm looking very closely at that. I'm also looking very guardedly because when it comes to giving people advice or guidance, you don't want to get it wrong. I had another experience where somebody used AI to get a really quick overview. I think it was another podcast host, and they were like, I used AI and I have this introduction for you. And I was like, that is not even close to accurate. I don't know if they spelled my name wrong and got a different Robert MacPhee or something, but I mean, it wasn't even close. So I do want to make sure if I'm going to go down that path that it is really accurate. And then the second opportunity for that kind of leverage is some sort of train the trainer. And I get this quite a bit from people who participate in the work that I do. They say, well, I want to do this. I want to share this with other people like you're sharing it. So there is an opportunity, and probably in the not too distant future, I will be setting something up where I can be training people to do the values work in the way that I do it, like sharing it with other people. And that's another way, obviously, to leverage and create more impact than I can do as just one person.
Is this something that you would do within your own organization, or maybe you would work with HR teams to then empower companies with that? Are you looking at growing your own company? Is that what you mean?
Well, that's something I can already do. So if an HR department wants to roll this out throughout their whole company, I have actually had really good experience, one within Jack's organization, and for years I also was a subcontractor for a customer service culture company where I was teaching a train the trainer model. Rather than go in and teach this customer service approach to everyone in the company, I would go in and teach maybe 10, 12, 20, whatever people in the organization how to teach the material. But both with Jack's company and with that customer service company, it's called Uplifting Service, amazing company, they're based in Singapore. They had put together a whole program like to make it really easy for those people who are taking on the responsibility. In addition to everything else they're doing in the company, suddenly they're going to be teaching Jack Canfield's success principles or teaching this uplifting service program. So we created videos that they could use, and a whole like system that they could literally open the notebook and start on page 1 and facilitate this content in the way that it was intended to be facilitated. Because it's a lot to ask somebody. I mean, I've been doing this work for 25 plus years, and you can throw me in a training room tomorrow with no preparation, and I'll do just fine. But to take somebody who's really committed to this work and wants to teach it and sees the value in the organization and expect them to just land in a training room and be facilitating the content, taking people through exercises. All of my work is very experiential and interactive. It's not just me talking to people. That's a lot to ask for people who have a day job in addition to taking on the responsibility to be part of a training team like that. So it would have to be created. It's not something I could just hand off my notes to the HR department and say, go get them.
Right back around to the values.
There's quite a bit involved in doing. Yeah. I mean, you could do that, but it won't be done very well.
I'm sure there'd be a huge watering down effect, which would then, of course, reduce the impact of your values and the impact that you can have as a result.
Yeah, for sure.
Robert, you work with companies, you work with leaders, you help people develop values, right? Or at least recognize their values and align their company with that. I think one of the biggest challenges that leadership faces today, and this is something that I'm sure you help companies with internally as well, is uptake of change, right? Adoption of new things, whether it's change in culture and identification of values or change with technology, right? Change with systems and approaches, mindset around that. So when we're looking at helping leaders navigate change resistance, especially with AI adoption, based on your experience with the concrete company, with working with Jack, with the transformations you've helped other companies achieve, what sort of values-based framework would you use to help teams embrace this rather than resist the technological change?
Well, I think the values, and again, I confess to being biased, but I do think the values work helps to kind of streamline that process, to kind of, grease the skids and make people more open. Because the truth is, as human beings, we don't like change. It's just a fact. I call it the change paradox. On the one hand, we want things to be different. We want to make more money. We want to improve our relationships. We want to, have more free time, whatever. We want things to be different. We want change. But then when change happens, we get very uncomfortable. And even sadly with getting in better physical condition or making more money, when that happens to people, they get really uncomfortable. And again, it's just part of being human. And in an organization or for an individual, when someone has done the values work and can see that the change that they want is aligned with their values, it's aligned with what's most important to them, I'm not going to lie to you and say that discomfort goes away, but it's just a stronger foundation to operate from. Yeah, that does make me uncomfortable. The idea of making twice as much money or losing 50 pounds or whatever, that makes me a little uncomfortable. I can't really imagine that happening. And what are people going to say? And what are they going to think of me? Am I going to lose my friends? And blah, 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 the stuff we do to ourselves. But if I've already made the decision that that is what is really important to me, and it's important to me for the right reasons. I mean, especially with money, people say they want to double their income. Well, that's just an arbitrary number. But when we do values work, we look at why. What does that mean? Double your income. What opportunities does that create for you? How is your life going to be different? And then people are like, wow, I don't want to just, make $1 million or double my income. I want that. I want to be on that beach. I want to be running that organization. I want to have that kind of relationship with my team. Whatever it is, different for everybody. But when there's that kind of grounding in values, it really does help people navigate through the change. And then the other thing I would just say is, doing this kind of work, personal development, professional development, just increasing our awareness of how the world works and how we operate within it, how we can create change in our life with a little less angst. The awareness is a really powerful tool. I mean, so much of this work is just about increased awareness and making different choices. And without the awareness, we're never going to make different choices. So I think that awareness piece is huge for people to just keep learning. The concept of curiosity has been coming up for me in a huge way over the last 6 months. There's an incredible scene about curiosity and the importance of curiosity.
Mm,
That is like I use it in my trainings now. Like it's so cool.
wow.
Like the
I
power
recognize the name. I don't know if
of
I've ever
being
seen that.
aware and being curious. And you'll start noticing how most people in the world today are not curious because they already know what's right. They already
Mm,
know how it should be done. They already know. They already know. Like, why would I be curious?
mm-hmm.
And I find that very sad because curiosity is, for me, a much better way to navigate through life. When someone just says something crazy and you want to say, "Are you stupid?" If you said, "Oh, that's really interesting. Tell me more about that," and then shut up.
Robert, I want to thank you so much for joining the Growth Shift today and sharing your insights and your frameworks and your lessons with the audience. Looking back at your journey from parking lots to Jack Canfield to developing your own breakthrough methodology, what's the one piece of advice that you'd give to a leader who knows they need to make a major change, but perhaps is paralyzed by uncertainty of the outcome?
Wow, just one? I think, the piece I just talked about with curiosity, again, that's just really present for me these days. And I think a commitment to lifelong learning. I think those two things kind of go together.
Mm,
To stay curious and be looking for new and different ways to do things. It's one of the things Jack Canfield taught me. He is truly one of the leaders in the personal and professional development space. Like he's an amazing man and he practices what he preaches. And I was so thrilled to have him as a mentor. And you know what? If you and I went to a weekend workshop and Jack was there as well, Jack would be sitting in the front row with a notebook ready to learn from whoever that person was who was leading the workshop, even if it was one of his students from years ago. And I've really taken that with me. Like I believe in that 100%. Like I've been blessed. I've been able to learn from people like Jack, amazing teachers. I do a little gratitude journal every day. It almost always comes up, my amazing teachers and all that I've learned and just wanting to continue to learn and grow and explore because there's always some better way. There's always some little change we can make, and it's a good thing. Not
mm,
always. We say you try something new and it either works or it doesn't work. If it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, don't do that anymore.
mm-hmm.
But that's kind of the way it goes. And if we're willing to stay curious and be committed to continuing to learn and grow, I think it will make us a better leader. It will encourage that same kind of behavior from the people in our organization and ultimately will create, again, more of the results and experiences and environments that we really want to create.
Now, curiosity might kill a cat, but it sounds like it's probably the key to continued growth.
Yeah, I don't know where that saying came from. I like cats, and I don't know. There's a lot of curiosity around here, but no dead cats, so I
Yeah,
think we're good to go.
fantastic. Robert, for any of our audience who might like to reach out and connect with you to learn more about what you're doing or perhaps to potentially work with you, what would be the best way to contact you?
Either, we talked about, well, we didn't really talk about my book, but my book is called Living a Values-Based Life. So if you go to valuesbasedlife.com, we did talk about excellent decisions, excellentdecisions.com. Again, I'm a small organization. I'm not that hard to find. I don't have 27 gatekeepers. So as long as you've got my name spelled right, you're going to find me pretty easily. MacPhee. And love connecting with people to talk about the ways they can live a more values-based life and, again, be creating those results and experiences and environments that they really want to be experiencing.
And that's a wrap on another episode of The Growth Shift. If this conversation sparked something for you, whether it's a new perspective on failure, a strategy you want to try, or just the reminder that every setback can become a setup for something bigger, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid change. They're the ones who shift strategically through it. If you're ready to build the systems that help you grow without the chaos, head over to valentix.io. We help businesses like yours scale smarter, not harder. I'm David Zilstra, and I'll see you in the next shift.